Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm not Josh.
Wait, what? Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the PUDs Podcast. What's up?
Not much. As you can probably tell, I'm not Josh.
Yeah, our buddy Josh, unfortunately, is still dealing with some house issues, or fortunately, because he's finally in his house. Josh, we wish you all the best. Apparently, I can't talk when you're not here. Getting all nervous tonight.
He doesn't know what to do with himself without you.
Yeah, I don't know. The chemistry's just not there.
I guess being with someone for 13 years isn't enough.
Yeah, it's just not the same as looking at Josh across from me in the chair. It's just not as soothing, I guess. But yeah, so Ash was kind enough to fill in on this week. Kind of wanted to get an episode out. It's been a little while since you've heard from us. So yeah, so here we are. Getting a pretty good idea for the main topic tonight, something that's kind of specific to one of our journeys we've been on together, so to speak, and something we've mentioned in the podcast before. But I guess we'll get into the scramble. So what happened this weekend? Even though we were together, we know what happened this weekend.
So Rylan celebrated 11 months. One more month until she's a year old, which I don't know. I feel like for some reason this month hit me harder than other months. I think it's because she has one more month left as a baby, because I didn't know this, but apparently once they turn 1, they're considered a toddler. I always thought they were a baby until they were like 2, but apparently...
Yeah, 1 to 3 years is the toddler range.
Yeah, so I don't know. Knowing she has one more month as a baby, it's just hitting me harder than the previous months.
Oh man, I don't know. I'm pretty excited about her being a year old. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a pretty
big milestone. We've kept her alive for almost a year, soon to be a year.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's
mom vibes.
Things
we'll never understand.
But. We had a good weekend. We took her to the beach for the first time, actual ocean beach for the first time. And going to the beach with a baby, soon to be toddler, is definitely a whole different thing.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. We went to, we tried to go to Second Beach in Newport. Was a little crowded, I think, just because in general it is this time of year in the summer, so a lot of people are down there. And the folk festival, or rather the jazz festival, I think was going on this weekend in Newport. So we ended up at First Beach, or otherwise known as Easton's Beach, down in Newport. But it was fun. But yeah, definitely different going with a soon-to-be toddler.
Yeah, I mean, it was still a ton of fun. I always love experiencing things like with her and seeing how she like reacts to everything. She loved going in the water with the waves. We brought her in a little bit. Could have done without all the seaweed, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's seaweed. It happens.
Yeah.
I think I literally had like pounds and pounds of seaweed. I went in the water briefly and did a little bit of body surfing and just was like, whatever, it's seaweedy, but I was washing seaweed out of my hair for like 3 days, which wasn't super fun. And I kind of smelled like a clam or something, despite showering.
It's fine. I mean, but Rylan definitely enjoyed the water. She was like smiling and laughing when like the waves would hit her a little bit.
Yeah,
so
that was cute. She was giggling.
Yeah, that was really fun to see. She's very mobile now, crawling all around. So she was like trying to crawl all over the sand, and definitely just keeps you a lot busier than going to the beach without a child. But, we wouldn't have it any other way. It was still a really fun day together.
Yeah, no, it was cool. She was like chasing seagulls and stuff. It was pretty funny for sure. Yeah, and I think on Saturday, Josh and I went golfing at Segregansett down here in Taunton, and not the greatest round that we had. I was coming off an 86 last time I played, and he's been breaking 100 pretty much every time, but the greens were just absolutely insane. It was like stupid. We kept 3-putting all the time, if not worse than that. So not much this weekend. I guess, are you okay to get into Nick's music moment now?
Go for it.
All right, so as usual, just was kind of rehashing, going through sort of my recently played and kind of looking at different things that I thought were interesting this week and songs that I was re-listening to. Again, some of them are newer, some of them are a little bit older, but the first one is Bending Hectic by The Smile. and the album is just a single, so it's called the Bending Hectic single. So the Smile is actually a newer band that I think formed maybe over COVID, that Johnny Greenwood and Tom York from Radiohead formed, along with another drummer that I forget his name and where he was from, but he definitely played in another band that's well known too. But they're wicked good. Me and Nate saw them, friend of the podcast, Nate. We saw them last year, and it was really good. It's good to see Tom York making some new music. Another song, kind of after I was listening to what we talked about on the podcast with the Red House Painters and Mark Kozilek, it's this song Carissa by Sun Kill Moon, otherwise known as Mark Kozilek's just sort of another vehicle he's in. And the album's called Benji. So it's a super depressing folky song, but has a really pretty riff and kind of pretty interesting lyrics. It's I guess it's about basically a cousin he had that actually died in the fire, which was like a second cousin he had. And then I guess actually her grandfather actually passed away in an accidental fire too. So it was kind of like creepy in a weird circumstance.
That is creepy.
But yeah, it's as you can see, it's kind of depressing. I promise it's a really pretty song to listen to and stuff. And the lyrics are kind of like wrenching, but in like sort of a good way. More happy song, Ruthless by the band Cannons, and the album's Fever Dream. Cannons is kind of a band that I got into probably like last year, and they've been on the radio a decent much, but just sort of a pop sort of all band, like nothing crazy, but just sort of good vibes and really catchy. Their singer has a really good voice. For number 4, we got Spittin' Off the Edge of the World by the Yeah-Yeahs, off the album Cool It Down, which is pretty new. I love this song. I've covered it on guitar, or I should say I do cover it on guitar. It's the opener off the album, and it's just good. It opens up with this like big synth sort of riff thing that comes in, and Carino's voice sounds awesome on it. And lastly, we have the song Ablaze by a group called School of Seven Bells. And the album's actually just called SVIIB, as in like the Roman numerals School of Seven Bells abbreviation sort of deal. And I think they're from New York. They're not around anymore. I think their guitarist actually passed away from cancer pretty young, which is kind of depressing. But they sort of did this album. I think they recorded it before he passed away. And it was like sort of their final album. But definitely not an as popular band, but really good song, again, called Ablaze. So I think on that note, do you want to tell everybody what our main topic is going to be tonight?
Sure. So we decided, we were thinking, what can the two of us talk about for a long period of time that we've both experienced together? So we couldn't think of anything better than to talk about our experience hiking the 48. So since there are 48 4,000 footers.
Yep, and this is the New Hampshire 48 4,000
yes,
footers.
The New Hampshire 48.
We've mentioned it briefly before, I think, when we talked about hiking lists, and I'm sure I've mentioned it several times, but we also kind of decided that we'll probably make it a two-parter since there are 48 peaks. There's not 48 hikes necessarily that we did. That actually would probably be something that would have been good, but I have our paperwork. Ash made a lovely little list of dates and everything from when we actually did this and had to submit for our AMC 4,000 footer patches. But yeah, I think we'll do the first 24 peaks at least tonight.
We'll go in chronological order.
Yeah, we'll go in chronological order. We got sort of the dates. I won't say when we did them. I have the year and stuff and generally time frame of when we did them. And actually I can grab my other sheet really quick, but we'll start rolling through them.
Is that the one they sent us?
No, this is one I printed from online. And one thing I think probably one of the most frequently asked questions, if you've never heard of this list, there's a bunch of different lists around just in hiking in general, whether it be all the way up to like the 7 summits being like the highest summits on each continent, or there's different 14ers in Colorado, 14,000 footers, but New Hampshire is kind of known for the 4,000 footers. Now, there are multiple peaks over 4,000 feet. There's probably many more in New Hampshire, actually, than an actual 4,000 footer. But the whole deal is with how the AMC does this. And keep in mind, like, there's always advantages in technology as far as, like, how they can tell altitudes of different peaks and sort of heights of land. But generally, the thing that distinguishes a 4,000 footer from any peak is that it has to be 200 feet above any ridge connecting to a higher neighboring peak. So that kind of knocks out, if you do know of the list, like that knocks out like the South Peak of Moose Lock, Guyot or Gio, that's kind of near to like Bond and West Bond Cliff. Like it knocks out a lot of those peaks, so they don't count. So I think, do you want to talk about how we got into it a little bit?
Sure. So
how we started that crazy journey?
Yeah, so we didn't necessarily, like, some people will research the 48 and they'll kind of do a lot of planning before they even start.
You
and
should do that, by the way.
They'll kind of set out with like, okay, I'm going to do the 48 before they even start. Whereas that wasn't necessarily our experience. We didn't start hiking the 4,000 footers in New Hampshire with the goal of doing the 48.
No.
It's something that kind of happened as we went.
Yeah, my buddy Mike, friend of the podcast, Mike, who's getting married actually within a week. Hopefully by today, and the weather's good and stuff. So super excited for that up and coming next week. Could have mentioned that in the scramble, but whatever, it came up. So yeah, Mike had hiked a bunch of New Hampshire before, and ended up working with him, and I still work with him, not as directly as I used to. But yeah, and he kind of was talking about hiking, I think, one day, and like suggested, I think we were taking a trip up there on Columbus Day. Had to be 2013, I think.
It was the summer of 2013.
Yeah, the summer of 2013. I thought it was around Columbus Day or October of 2013, around that.
So the first hike we did.
I know, I'm talking about, I was precursoring even the first hike, just because like, remember we went up that Columbus Day and like Mike had told us about, the Kinsmans and about Lonesome Lake.
Oh, yes.
That's where I was going.
I didn't know if that's where we were starting. I
Yeah.
didn't know we were going that far back.
But we were going up there, I think it was Columbus Day weekend. It had to be like 2013
Yes.
or something like that. And he mentioned, he's like, oh, like we were going to do the Flume Gorge. And like I'd gone up there as a kid. I hadn't been back in a long time. So like I really wanted to go up there with Ash and check it out, and never done foliage up there at the time. I can't believe it's already that long ago that we were up there. It doesn't seem that long. But yeah, Mike and like us being super naive, I think we did the Flume, and I'm like, oh, we'll go to Lonesome Lake after. And like Lonesome Lake's a pretty good climb. I think it's like 2 miles and like 2,000 feet or maybe 1,000 feet. I forget exactly, but it's a pretty, like, it's sort of switchbacky, but it's beautiful. I mean, even if you just want to take like your kids up there, like I honestly would be confident enough to do that with Ryan on my back up there. Like it's not that crazy. But I remember thinking, like, when we get to Lonesome Lake, we're like, it's kind of late in the day. Like we won't try to get to like North Kinsman or South Kinsman. And those of you that have done the list know that the Kinsmans are definitely not some of the easiest first 4,000 footers, which Mike definitely did not tell us. I think he still feels bad about it to some capacity if we bring it up. It all worked out fine. But yeah, so that was around 2013. And I think around 2014, like Ash was kind of saying before, was when I think we stayed around Newfound Lake. We did Mount Cardigan, I think, earlier in the week with my dad. And Mount Cardigan's a 52 with a view peak, kind of in that Newfound Lake sort of area. It's like west. It's got an open summit. It's a really great little peak. And I guess after that, sort of, we were like kind of just like, oh, let's try for a 4,000 footer. Like it definitely wasn't like, I don't even think we knew about a list really yet at that point.
No, I mean, I personally didn't know.
We definitely weren't
list.
trying to do it though. I would say, because I'm like, at that point too, you're like, shit, like there's 47 more of these after you do one. You're like,
no, I don't even think I knew there was a New Hampshire 48 list when we did our first hike. Yeah,
I probably didn't know, or at least I wasn't consciously thinking like we're gonna do the 48. So yeah, do you want to talk about doing North Kinsman as our first? So we actually wanted to do North and South. It was a hot, humid day, I believe in July or August. I don't have the exact date. I could look it up on the sheet, but as long as we got it down that it was in 2014 that we started.
Yes.
Let me see if I can actually find that really quick on here.
I want to say it was like July,
end
of July, beginning of August.
Okay, it was so exactly. It was July 23rd, 2014 that we started. Okay. That was our first peak. So yeah, super hot and humid. I'm pretty sure we both had cotton on. Maybe you didn't. I definitely had a cotton shirt and just khaki shorts on.
I didn't have cotton on, so that's good. And we were wearing hiking boots. So we actually ended up buying these like camelback backpacks. Yep. These were our first like hiking backpacks that had like the water bladder in the back.
Quote. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the bladders.
We definitely, I remember we ran out of water. Like
on the way down, you ran out of water.
On the way down,
super thirsty. And we didn't even get to South Kinsman, which means we definitely would have been out of water for a while. Didn't have a water filter. I could go on and on about the things. I already mentioned the cotton, so cotton kills. Don't wear cotton when you're in the mountains. It doesn't lose moisture like synthetic stuff does. It'll make you colder. It also I think it's just uncomfortable. It doesn't dry off. Yeah, we didn't have water. I think I did have a flashlight at least, which was probably a good thing looking back. So yeah, North Kinsman up by Lonesome Lake, up the Fish and Jimmy Trail, so this is our first experience really hiking in the Whites at all.
Yes.
Anybody that's been on that trail can attest to the fact it's not a super easy trail. It was wet and slick that day too. It has wood blocks drilled into places in the rock for footholds. I think Ash was ready to kill me when we got to Kinsman Pond, and I told her that we still had like a good bit to go. Like, I just remember it feeling like forever.
Yeah, I think I just had really no point of reference, because
Yeah,
we
never
had
hiked that
done
long.
some smaller hikes, but never anything like that. And I remember too, at the time, we didn't know what this was, but there was a lot of like up and downs, and that's when we first
aka
learned
PUDs.
Yes, that's where we first learned the term PUDs.
Pointless up
because
and down.
I remember the trail being very like up and down, and
Especially after Lonesome Lake.
Yeah, especially after Lonesome Lake. And I think I remember you kind of like reading into the hike after we did it, and that's where you saw that term.
Yeah.
And we were like, yeah, that definitely, there was a lot of up and downs.
Yeah, looking
that's
back,
probably the thing that I remember.
They're not
most
like
about
insane,
that hike.
like especially once you start like peak bagging and you're going between multiple peaks in a day, and you get used to like the going down for 300 feet, 500 feet, whatever, and back up. But yeah, it was rough. So we did make it up there finally. I think up to this point, just a short backstory, I think we had done Monadnock and probably just Cardigan at that point. I don't think we had really done, and Monadnock we must have done in like 2011 probably, because I think I just started working out Amika at that point.
Yeah.
Or 2013, maybe it was 2011, I forget. But yeah, so we hadn't have a ton of experience, but yeah, we got a full face full of experience pretty quickly hiking North Kinsman. When we got to the summit of North Kinsman, it was so clouded that you couldn't see Franconia Ridge, but you could see Lonesome Lake below, which I guess at least let us feel like we had come like a certain distance. And at that point, I think we heard a rumble of thunder, like as we were sitting, like North Kinsman, if you haven't been there, like the actual summit's kind of wooded, but there's a super nice ledge that looks kind of to the east across, and you can see Lonesome Lake. If it's clear, you can see Franconia Ridge, and it's super pretty. But yeah, it was hazy. We heard thunder. I was probably ready to shit my pants because we were on top of a mountaintop, basically running out of water, super sweaty, kind of cold at that point. It probably wasn't that warm. It was probably in like the 50s or 60s, and you're just all sweaty and stuff.
Yeah.
So we started moving down. I think basically the rain held off luckily until we got to, I think, Lafayette Campground at the bottom, and it opened up.
Yeah, one thing, there's a couple things that really stick out with that hike. One thing that really stuck out to me was just the nature of the trail itself, the ups and downs, the scrambles.
The rocks.
Yes, the rocks. The other thing is just like how, I don't know, it gave me like a respect for like nature and hiking and being safe, because I remember literally the second we reached the parking lot, it started downpouring.
Yeah, like if it had poured like that when we were on top of North Kinsman, like it would have been a pretty shitty situation.
Yes.
To put it in light. I mean, there's sections of straight slab coming down Fish and Jimmy Trail, and at that point, like I definitely wouldn't have had any idea to like go over the Cannonballs or take another way down, because I think there's Kinsman Pond Trail that goes in the other direction too. But yeah, we would have been in a rough place. For sure. It wouldn't have been great.
Yeah, so it was definitely a tough first hike, but it didn't deter us, clearly. I mean, I think
we got it done.
We got it done, and it was a great experience
Yeah.
thing for us to do together. I mean, I'm always somebody who likes to challenge myself physically, so, I felt really good when I had finished it, and, it was definitely a very positive experience. So,
For sure.
Fast forward a couple months, I think it was like October 2014, Columbus Day.
Yep.
We decided that we wanted to do some more 4,000 footers. And this was our first time doing basically peak bagging or doing 2 4,000 footers in one hike.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of the backstory. So we actually chose Liberty Flume. And kind of the backstory with that comes from me, nostalgia, being a kid, and like actually seeing those 2 peaks from the Flume Gorge, doing that sort of loop trail with my parents. And like, I can still remember, like, asked my dad, like, can you hike those peaks? And my dad was like, I guess so. Because there is a clearing. There's a couple spots now you can see them, but there's one main clearing like towards the end of the loop where you kind of hit boulders and like the Wolf's Den and that crap over there. But there's like an open view of Flume and Liberty. So like I kind of had in my head, I'm like, I really want to do those peaks. And we got a gorgeous day for that one in October. It was like
peak
perfect.
Foliage.
Yeah, peak foliage that year. We stayed at Newfound Lake with my parents because we just like Newfound Lake. It's a really pretty lake, and I think we found like an old hotel or something we stayed in. But yeah, peak foliage. Super nice. So what's the thing we underestimated with that and we learned?
We learned a lot about elevation gain.
Yeah, elevation gain. There we go. I knew we'd come to that. So yeah, elevation gain. We were looking at the mileage, and I think it's about 11 miles if you go out and back.
It's a good hike.
Liberty and Flume, some people do it as a loop hike. I still haven't been up the Flume Slide Trail yet, but you can do it as a loop going up the Flume Slide, which is a pretty has a reputation for being a pretty intense trail, one that you probably don't want to descend. It's just wet and ledgy. I don't think it's ever actually open slide. It's in the woods. But that you can take that up to Flume and go across Franconia Ridge Trail to Liberty and go back down Liberty Springs Trail. Or you can do out and back, which is what we did. So I went up Liberty Springs basically across to Flume and then back up Liberty and then back out. Which looking back in retrospect, I think it's like 4,500 feet of elevation gain, or it's like 4,100. It's in that ballpark. We've done it in the winter too from the same route, and it's a kick butt hike, especially with snowshoes on. Going back up from Flume to Liberty before the summit of Liberty is very steep for like a half mile. It's a grind.
That's probably the part of the hike I actually remember the most, because I remember there was this like father and son who kept like leapfrogging us. So like they would be ahead of us and then they would stop and then we would go ahead and then we would just kind of kept like crossing each other. And I remember when we were going up that steep section, is that from Flume back up to Liberty?
Yeah, right before the summit of Liberty. Kind of after you hit the middle of the col between the two of them. It like beelines.
It's a pretty gnarly section. So I remember we were going up that section, and all I can remember is this dad and son were like on my ass, like.
Oh yeah, I forget about that. That's funny. And it's funny the different things that we remember.
And I remember being like, because you can't really go around. You kind of,
it's kind of like loose rock, and
you can't really like.
steep.
It's not like you can like move to the side. So I remember just going really fast because they were right behind me, and that's what really sticks out for me. And
what's funny is we probably become. I mean, not that we're super fast hikers, but in certain situations, we probably become those people that end up being on people's ass in steep sections.
I don't think
maybe
so.
not a ton, but
we're more courteous. Than
but
that.
yeah, they were. I should say like it's happened, but I'm definitely not rude where if I'm behind people. Like I don't like. They were like within feet behind your butt climbing. Yeah. Like, and you're all like breathing heavy and sweaty and exhausted.
I was struggling because I mean, up until that point, I had never done that much elevation gain. Like the Kinsmans are probably like half of that, maybe.
North Kinsman is not half of that, but it's
under
it's
3,000.
it's maybe 3,000 if that. Yeah. So you're talking like an additional 1,000 feet at least, which is a big difference
for sure.
In hiking, especially in the whites, and especially when you haven't hiked that much. That's funny that you remember that. Yeah, I think the thing I remember the most, I mean, number one, we were into rehash, like we just kept kind of learning along our journey and stuff. I definitely did more research this time. We had maps, I think, even for the first hike, but I had a better idea of what we were looking at. But again, didn't look at elevation gain. I was like, whatever. You just kind of look at it and you're like, man, like 4,000 feet. And like, you don't realize, like, I kind of consider, even when people ask about hiking the whites, like 4,000 feet in a day is like where it gets real. 3,000 feet is difficult. That's not crazy for most of the 4,000 footers, even if you do like one at a time. But once you get up in the northern presidentials, like 4,000 feet in a day is like, that's a good amount. 5,000 and plus above that is a pretty serious day for most people, especially people who don't hike. For people who don't like hike often, you end up with like jelly legs basically, which is what happened to both of us.
Yeah. I remember getting back to the house where we were staying, or the hotel, whatever it was. Yeah. And I sat down for a little bit, and then I remember like getting up, and I felt like I could barely walk. Like I had never felt anything like that before, and I remember like panicking.
My mom was like, "What did you do to her?"
Thinking like I wasn't gonna be able to like walk the next day, and I remember putting like what's that?
Like icy
hot. Like I was like panicking because I had never
lathering your legs in icy
anything
hot.
Like that before. I mean, I've always done sports and been an active person, but I've never felt anything like that before, like the level of sore that I felt. And I remember the next day still being sore, but like I could walk fine.
Yeah. I remember, distinctly, I remember it was cool to look down and see Lincoln from Flume and stuff. I remember it was pretty cold on top of Flume. We ate lunch there and stuff. Yeah. Didn't see it. I feel like for that time of year, like I don't remember there being a ton of people. There probably was a lot of people, like not like obscene amounts.
It's not
like,
something that sticks out to me.
Yeah, I don't remember that. But again, we had jeans on. I think I had like an Under Armour sweatshirt.
I had leggings on.
Yeah, you had leggings and something synthetic on at least. But yeah, we're still with like our sort of old Osprey packs at this point and everything. But Yeah, I definitely had a great sense of accomplishment. We had amazing views that day. I think I had my old Nikon camera with me. And it was cool too to see, like, you could actually see like probably Lincoln from the perspective we were out of Liberty, so you could see Franconia Ridge. Now I realize, looking back on old pictures when I've gone down memory lane, you could clearly see Bond Cliff, the Bonds, all that. We had no idea what any of this shit was. Looking at this, not shit, didn't. Beautiful peaks. What any of this stuff was in the distance. But yeah, like, it was a great day. I remember really having a cool sense of satisfaction, like when we were walking back, even though we were exhausted, walking back to the trailhead, like the last half mile or so, like the woods were beautiful, like the birch leaves were super yellow and vibrant. It's a
really pretty trail.
Everything
you cross over a bridge.
Yeah, you cross over
the end and at the beginning.
Penny River, I think. Yeah, because you start it and end on the bike path, actually, I think, from Liberty Springs trailhead. So that was number 2 and 3, and even at that point, I don't know if we were like, I still don't know if we were like, I don't know. And this was our first sort of above tree line too on Liberty. It was the first really kind of experience.
I can't pinpoint exactly when we decided we were going to do the 48. I really can't pinpoint which hike that. I don't know. It's like all kind of a blur to me when we decided we were going to do that.
It's funny because I started writing down accounts of these, and I think I stopped like probably around the Hancocks, which was a little over halfway through. I don't even know if we'll actually get to those tonight. We're gonna be surprised. I don't remember the order of these for sure. I kind of vaguely remember when we did these. I'm glad we
have the order in front of you, because I can't remember what.
So yeah, the winter happened. I forget if we went up. I think we did go up and stay in Lincoln that winter, and I think I got snowshoes and stuff, but we didn't do it. We like maybe went on the bike path. I forget.
We weren't ready for a winter 4,000.
No, we did. I think we did Artist Bluff. Maybe even the first time we might have even done that in the winter and stuff. So anyways, after the winter, spring rolls around again, and we decided we were going to go up to New Hampshire around Memorial Day weekend and do some more hiking. At this point, we also got my dad and we got my buddy Nate, friend of the podcast, Nate, to come with us. And for our 4th peak, not sure how exactly we decided upon this. At this point, I definitely had, I think, the 4,000 footer guide and had at least bought some material on hiking, so we had a good idea. I always shout out the 4,000 footer guide to people. I think they're writing a new one right now, but it is way better than All Trails or anything else you're going to find. It's literally called like hiking the 4,000 footers, the White Mountains. I think Steve Smith and I forget the co-author name. I think is like Mike Dickerman or something. But that thing is like the Bible for hiking the Whites and the 4,000 footers. But so we picked Moosilauke for our next one, or Moosilauke. People say it both ways. I believe it's called Moosilauke, like Moose Hillock almost, is the Indian name. I forget what it means, but it's the furthest southwest of the 4,000 footers. And also kind of figured it was easier than Liberty and Flume because we were taking Nate and my dad. I think Nate had done Monadnock and a couple other things. So like he had definitely hiked before and was stoked because he's super into photography. So he had his camera and whatnot. Moosilauke, what do you remember the most about Moosilauke? We had another beautiful day for this one. It was cold.
I was going to say, I think this was our first like bluebird day.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Hike. Like, meaning there was not a cloud in the sky.
Yeah.
We had perfect views. Nothing really stands out to me about the trail itself. I mean, I think it was just like a challenging, but not like, it wasn't, I think up until that point, because I had a little bit of comparison where kind of had that up and down ruggedness of North Kinsman, and then had that very long, lot of elevation gain of Liberty and Flume. This was kind of like a happy, like, medium.
Yeah, we did Gorge Brook Trail, which I think is under 3,000 feet.
I remember it not being too bad. Like, and we took our time, we had a good pace going. I felt like we didn't, I think too, because we had your dad with us and Nate, who were newer to hiking. I feel like we had a good pace during that. But
I remember thinking my dad was going to kill me like probably half a mile from the summit of Moosilauke.
He loved it though. Once we got to the top.
Yeah, he did.
Absolutely loved it.
He's like, I wouldn't be here unless I didn't want to. So yeah, he like knew what he got himself into, and I don't think we might have seen a little bit of snow, but like that year there wasn't really much snow left by Memorial Day.
One thing I do remember though is it was very cold.
It was
at the top.
Freezing.
This was definitely to date. Obviously, given we did one really hot in the summer and then the fall. This was
Memorial Day.
Yeah, for Memorial Day, which in New Hampshire is always a toss up. It could be really warm. It could be really cold.
It could be 90. It could be below freezing.
It was cold. And I remember it was very windy at the top of Moosilauke. So we were kind of stopped at the top taking pictures. And I just remember like I was so cold. I felt like I couldn't feel my hands. And I just was like, all right, I'm going down. bye.
Yeah, for sure.
I just left.
And because
it
it
was
geographically, like knowing what I know now, geographically, Moose Lock is on like the southwestern corner, sort of the 4,000 footers and the whites. So it gets blasted with wind out of the west, northwest, southwest. There's nothing really blocking it to the west. The next closest thing's like the Green Mountains in Vermont. So it's kind of at the forefront of that weather when weather systems kind of hit. It's got a big bald open summit, so that was really cool.
It had a sign, which was cool.
Yeah.
The first one that we did that had like a sign.
Yeah, the Dartmouth Outing Club maintains it. And the Ravine Brook Lodge and stuff was cool. So that was really nice. It was kind of a cool chill day. Nothing really that crazy happened. We just had really good views. We checked out South Peak on the way down. That was another one where I remember my dad was like, it's because it says like 0.1 or something to South Peak off the trail, but it's also like probably a couple hundred feet to get up to it. But I always remember my dad being like, I don't know who the hell makes the mileages on these trail signs in the whites, because it never seems like it's actually accurate. Which many people can probably sympathize with that.
I have to say, I think out of the previous 3 we had done, I think this one was probably my favorite that we had done so far.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked Liberty Flume too, but Moose Lock was cool. And I've been back to Moose Lock because you haven't been back again. Yeah,
no,
but I've been back like
back.
2 or 3 more times since, and I've done it in the winter too. So it's a great summit. I think honestly for Gorge Brook's not a bad pick for a first 4,000 footer.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was probably what we should have done for our first
don't
hike.
do North Kinsman as your first 4,000 footer unless you've hiked a lot in the Whites or in Maine or something, because it's just not. It's a cool mountain. I like it, but it's not a good first. So rolling right along here, your sister Hannah graduated high school we're in summer. Well, I guess spring, early summer of 2015.
It wasn't that much longer after we did Moose Lock.
It was in like June, I think.
Yeah.
I really wanted to hike in the Presidentials, and with where we were staying in relation to it, I think we're basically in like Bartlett or something.
Near North Conway, yeah.
Yeah, North Conway, Bartlett area. But really wanted to check out the Presidentials. Hannah wanted to hike. I was looking again by this point at stats. So I think Mount Eisenhower by Edmonds Path, the way we did it's like 3,000 feet, maybe a little under or over that. But yeah, we did Mount Eisenhower.
Yep. We had my parents with us.
Yeah, and we took your parents for the first 4,000 footer they had done.
Yeah, their first big hike. And I remember one thing that kind of sticks out from that hike, and I feel like we've told this story amongst friends and family so many times, but so the whole hike round trip, I think, was like 7 or 8 miles.
I think it was like 7.5 or 8 or something. To you out and back by Edmonds Path up Eisenhower.
Yeah, so the whole hike was about 7.5, 8 miles. And my mom took that as one way. So she thought one way.
Your poor mother.
It was like 7.5, 8 miles. So we're going up. We'd only probably been hiking for about an hour at that point, maybe not even. Yeah. And she asked like, oh, how much further, how far do you think we've gone or something like that? And we were like, oh, probably about a mile. And she just looked she was like white as a ghost. Defeated. She looked panicked. And we were like, what? And I don't know. I forgot exactly how it all came, but basically she thought we were going she thought it was going to be like miles. She thought we were taking her on this like 14 to 16 mile
we also
hike.
Realized later too that being the mom in the group that she packed a ton of food, like fresh cut fruit and like all this stuff. I don't know how much her backpack weighed.
I kid you not, when we got to the summit,
out how much it weighed.
She pulled out like a cantaloupe from her bag. I was like, okay.
Yeah. So Lisa was a champ that day, hauling up all this stuff. She had so much extra food that we ate it kayaking later that weekend.
Yes.
So she brought up, I think that was probably fairly exhausting. The trail going up Eisenhower Edmonds Path, it's pretty good.
That's another good first one.
First time we saw the Presidentials, and we're in that range, in that sort of southern Prezi range, which is just beautiful. I remember seeing it for the first time, just being like, wow, this is different than... at that point we hadn't done a lot, but it's that
had
whole...
a different feel to it.
That terrain is just different, and as anybody knows from the southerns to the northerns in the Presidentials, it changes a lot, kind of the terrain and what you're looking at. That was another, not a great weather day. It wasn't dangerous to hike or anything like that. Still had jeans on, I know from pictures. But I think rain moved in later. We actually hiked to, I thought we made it to Franklin. We definitely didn't make it to Franklin, now having done Franklin. But we went further up on the ridge we left your mom, and she was hanging out, which we probably shouldn't have done. But she wasn't moving anywhere, and the weather was okay. But me, you, Hannah, and your dad went up to further up on the ridge and got some views. Washington was clouded the entire time, and then it started raining, but not hard.
Like spitting.
Yeah, so we had some nice views. It was kind of a mysterious-y Lord of the Rings looking day. So that was number 5 for Eisenhower. And then we're going to fast forward to Columbus Day. So if you catch the theme here, it was basically becoming every holiday weekend we were going up. We were starting to go up to the Whites.
Memorial Day, Columbus Day.
This is a trend that would
summer.
happen, and it still happens to today, pretty much. It's generally just logistically, that's what we end up doing. So fast forward to basically Columbus Day weekend of 2015. And what was our next one? You guessed that? The Franconia Ridge Loop.
Oh, how could I forget?
Probably one of the most popular hikes, if not the most popular hike in the Whites today. Lincoln and Lafayette. So the classic loop. You can do all of Franconia Ridge too, but this is the classic loop. So I had heard great things about it. It was one of Mike's favorite hikes, Mount Lafayette and stuff. He always just called it Lafayette, but generally the loop that most people do includes going up to Little Haystack, and then Lincoln, Lafayette, and technically Truman in between Lincoln and Lafayette as well, which is a little sub peak in there. But yeah, that was a big one. And
yes,
unfortunately for us, it was clouded in the morning, so you couldn't tell that it got cold enough the morning before that it frosted and actually was snowing on top of Franconia Ridge and flurrying in the morning.
Snow in October.
Yeah, it was, which is not unusual now we know, but I remember at first being like kind of like we did the loop counterclockwise, which I usually suggest people do it both ways. Mike likes to do it clockwise. I think counterclockwise is better because you go up all the waterfalls going up Falling Waters Trail. I think most people suggest that. It's probably a little bit hairier coming down than coming down Bridle Path, in my opinion. But you pass a bunch of pretty spectacular waterfalls, and then the grind up to the ridge begins. It's like almost 4,000 feet in the loop, about 10 miles, something like that, or maybe 9 miles and 4,000 feet. But yeah, after we got past Cloudland Falls, I remember being like, oh, cool, like it's snowing and stuff. And then we got closer and closer. And I think one of the classic lines, we got past Shining Rock, where it really got steep, and it's like the trail people that were cutting the trail just gave up, and it just beelines up to Little Haystack at that point. Like it climbs pretty aggressively. And your dad looked at me and he's like, "We're going way the fuck up there."
That's right.
Quote,
we
unquote.
Did. Both of our dads came with us.
I didn't.
They were troopers.
Totally, I'm excited to talk about this one. Sorry, I forgot to mention, but this was it was me and you, both our dads, Tony and Bob, and then your sister Hannah also was joining on this fine October Saturday morning. We got to the lot super early. I'm glad we got there early. Now you'd have to get there earlier because it's just insane in that lot and you can't park on the road anymore.
I think we had to park on the road, actually.
No, we parked in the lot.
Oh, really?
I remember. Yeah, we got there probably before 6:00, I think.
Okay. I don't remember the time.
Yeah. But yeah, we got up to the ridge. It was getting a little slippery. It wasn't icy. Like you could have used micro spikes later on the ridge. On that point, we didn't know what micro spikes were at that point, so that was irrelevant. Still wearing cotton, but we got up to Little Haystack and got blasted with wind. I thought it was cold.
Moosilauke was windy, but this was like a whole other level of windy.
The bright side was that as the day went on, the clouds pretty much lifted by the time, I'd say once we got to Lincoln, they lifted completely, and it was basically turned into a bluebird day. And foliage was spectacular. It's still probably one of the best foliage hikes I've done to date.
Yeah. And at that point, I remember we were starting to think that maybe your dad was like, good luck, because when we did Moosilauke with him, it was also like perfect weather, like blue
when we did
skies.
Cardigan with them too, it was great.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Spectacular day. Another day we learned a lot. It was just a long day. I don't think I mean, there was nothing crazy that really happened. I mean, other than being really cold once we bundled up and stuff, we just kind of started making our way across the ridgeline. And there's a reason it has a reputation for being one of the nicest hikes in the Whites. It's because, frankly, it is. Like, even if it's a zoo, it's still absolutely beautiful. I'm sure on that day we passed hundreds of people too, even back.
When you're going over the ridge.
Yeah. You're above tree line for like a mile and a half, which also is one reason that it makes the hike dangerous in bad weather.
Yes.
And also get blasted from wind by the west. It's highest point in the Whites outside of the presidentials.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Like, I remember thinking like, wow, this is the best
it was spectacular
view I think I've ever had hiking. Up until that point. Yeah,
and at that point too, we had a little bit of an idea. Like, you could look across and I could identify like the Kinsmans, and you could see Moosilauke kind of way out, and you could see Lonesome Lake and stuff. So that was just a beautiful day. It was cool to be able to share that with everybody too back then. My dad fell on the way down, I want to say, and actually
he broke his trekking pole.
He broke a trekking pole because it was still ice in the shade. So that's kind of a fun thing to watch for if you're hiking, is stuff that's in the shade, especially that time of year in shoulder season. It doesn't de-ice as quickly as the rest. So coming down Lafayette, I think all of us might have slipped a little bit. My dad slipped pretty good, but luckily he was fine. He broke a trekking pole instead of like something else. So that was good. My dad would go on to break a couple trekking poles throughout his hiking career. But yeah, it was great. I think by this point we were pretty much like that had to be sort of around when we were like, I think we're gonna do it.
Probably
we're gonna try to do the 48.
I think we were starting to get pretty invested at that point.
Yeah, I mean that was number 6 and number 7 for us. So yeah, it was just great. Speeding right along part 1 might end up being a little bit long too, but
or maybe we could make it a 3-parter.
Yeah, we'll go. A lot of these are group hikes too coming up. So fast forward, we go through the winter and stuff. I don't remember what we were doing. We definitely were hiking more by this point. I know one thing that was probably just notable around home that I'll mention quickly is that we started hiking Wachusett after that happened, because me and my dad were already looking to go out hiking again. Like we got the hiking bug, and we started hiking Wachusett a lot through like that winter and the fall and into the next spring. So starting to get our hiking legs a little bit more. We had something sort of more local to go to when we wanted to. But yeah, so another sort of nostalgic thing for me was Twin Mountain in Carroll. I'd stayed in that village at some hotels growing up a few times with my parents, so I wanted to do the Twins. I pretty much had that in my mind. It looked like longer mileage, which I shouldn't say it looked like, but it is. It's longer mileage than Franconia Ridge, but pretty similar elevation gain. It's like a little under 4,000. I should say a little under 4,000 if you do out and back from Route 3, basically, from Little River Road. But yeah. So what was your most memorable thing? And I should say it's Memorial Day basically of 2016. We went up again.
So there was definitely a big contrast in the weather from the previous Memorial Day. So
a huge contrast.
The previous Memorial Day was very cold, especially once we got to the summit of Moose Lock. This Memorial Day was very hot and just sticky and humid.
It was hot as balls. It
was very hot. I don't remember what the temperature was exactly, but I remember I think this was probably close to when we hiked North Kinsman in the summer. It was that hot.
It was, I know back home, like around Providence, it hit like 90 degrees.
It was
I think on a very hot Saturday that we hiked, weekend. It was we hiked on the Saturday. Like typically we'd go up the Friday and end up hiking on Saturday most of the time. But yeah, it was super hot. Definitely one of the hottest, stickiest, muggiest hikes I've had to date by far. Like it was just pea soup in the morning. Like it was one of those days we woke up, I think it was already 70 degrees at the trailhead at probably like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. We took basically the North Twin Trail. We avoided the river crossings across Little River that nobody ever does. We did the main one. The main river crossing, if you're up there Memorial Day, it's flowing pretty good. It was a pretty legit river crossing.
That's right. That's the one with the river crossing.
Hindsight being 2020, probably just should have taken our boots off and walked through rather than risking like slipping. I think Matt Allberg. Yeah, and we had, so I keep forgetting. We had Matt Allberg. We had Nate again. We had my dad and us too, basically. Mm-hmm. That was sort of our crew for that one. And Little River was kind of raging. We found a way across where some tree limbs went across, and
we basically had to it was like a balance beam. Yeah, we had to walk across sticks.
Yeah, it's a tricky crossing.
I remember being a little nervous for that.
Yeah,
but
you made it. You conquered it. And one other kind of notable thing that sticks in my mind is that we got there to where that last crossing is, and there were 2 guys camping, and one of them I think had Lyme disease or something, or wasn't feeling great, and he was saying that he's like, yeah, like you cross the river and it starts to go up, and then he's like, then it really, really, really goes up. And I found that true in my revisit of the Twins this past winter. But yeah, it's like it's not bad. It's basically flat until you cross Little River the last time. It's long but flat. It's like 2 miles in or something like that of kind of just flat going by riverbed.
So that's something that sticks out to me too, because I feel like this was the first hike I did where the starting off on the hike was very flat for a while. I feel like a lot of the hikes we had done up until that point either kind of went up pretty quickly, or this, I hadn't been on a hike where it's been that flat for that long, which was really nice starting the hike because you kind of got
get a warm up.
You got a nice warm up, but then I remember coming down from the hike, I was miserable. I was so over it. the last 2 miles felt like forever. That's one thing that I remember about that hike.
Yeah, and but again, we lucked out. Like my dad, we'd always say, was the good luck charm. He was still holding through because we got up to basically North Twin to the first outlook at the ledges after a long ass grind up that ridge. Like we weren't moving as quickly as we probably do nowadays. Just experience and also just probably being in a little bit better shape too. But yeah, we got up to North Twin on the ledges. It was beautiful. It was like it was a hazy day because it was hot and humid, but it was beautiful. Like you could see across and everything. You could see Washington, and I think it's still probably South Twin has I think one of my favorite views in the Whites too. But made it all the way across. Nothing super notable other than being super hot.
Nick wrung out his shirt and
yeah, I was wearing a cotton shirt.
Disgusting.
I think I had synthetic shorts at that point and at least some socks and different things that were better. But yeah, I wrung out my shirt, I think, on the ledges or on the summit of North Twin, and Ash almost vomited, understandably, because it was pretty disgusting. But yeah, it was just wringing wet. All of us were super sweaty. There was still ice and snow in a little bit, kind of going to South Twin. But we hung out on South Twin, just had a great day. Kind of were getting in the grind. Like I felt like we were kind of getting in the groove of things at that point. Like, I don't know, just in terms of like the food we'd bring and the gear we had. Like by that point, I definitely had a headlamp, and I think we might have not had camelbacks anymore by that point. We might have even changed up our backpacks at that point.
You might have got a different one, but I had my camelback for a while.
Yeah.
I remember. I don't remember when I got like a different one, but I'm pretty sure I still had it at that point.
Yeah, so that was number 8 and 9 for us. So we're still living in 2016, flowing right into the summer. So yeah, we were definitely full force. Like we're gonna do the 48 at this point. Like we were definitely into it. We're like, we think we can do it. We hadn't gone to the Northern Presidentials yet, which kicked our ass. That'll be soon. But next kind of short, steep, and sweet one was Cannon. So I think we did this with my dad. We did it in I believe it was July of 2016. We're on a summer vacation, once again staying around Newfound Lake. My dad joined for that one. That was a couple. There's a couple weird stories we have from that one. One was that we were walking around Lonesome Lake, so we went up Lonesome Lake Trail to hit Kinsman Ridge Trail, which, knowing now, Kinsman Ridge Trail up the backside of Cannon's really steep. It's also really washed out if you come from the Cannon tram lot. It's kind of just shitty either way. Good views and stuff, but just very rocky, not great trail. But so we get up to Lonesome Lake, and there's literally a guy in a white robe, and I feel like people think I'm making this up. Ash can validate.
Okay, just small correction.
Yeah.
So he wasn't wearing a white robe. He was wearing a white like button-down shirt. Yeah. But it was like a linen kind of white button-down shirt, and then he had on like these very light tan like linen pants.
Yeah, I'm exaggerated with the robe.
Yeah, the
factor.
robe.
He wasn't wearing. He definitely didn't have.
He had on like
sandals.
He had on like sandals.
Yeah. And he told us, he was like, "Have a blessed day."
And he looked
when we walked by.
like Jesus.
He looked like Jesus. We called him from that day forward. The myth is, and we refer to him as Lonesome Lake Jesus, because he looked like Jesus in the paintings you see, and he had a white shirt on and khaki pants and sandals, and told us to have a blessed day.
Yeah.
But that was a pretty notable thing. The other thing was that it was sunny at Lonesome Lake and below all day, but once we got up to the backside of Cannon going up Kinsman Ridge Trail, there was a cloud that moved in, and it dumped rain on us. Poured. Like we were like drowned rats. I debated turning around several times, kind of looking at my dad. My dad's like, "Hey, like it was just me, my dad, and Ash." And he's like, "If like whatever you feel comfortable with." So I think we like chilled out for a little bit, and the rain did slow down a little bit. So I was like, "All right." Like we had made it, I think 2/3 of the way up Cannon at that point from the Kinsman Ridge Trail.
I remember it was
junction.
short and steep.
Yeah, I remember that was another one where you're like, where does the trail go? And you're like looking up and you're like, oh, it goes, you see like a blaze on a rock like 10 feet above you and about 2 or 3 feet in front of you, which is kind of crazy. And that was funny too, because you kind of disoriented when you pop out of the woods to where like the observatory tower is. And all of a sudden there's like a dirt path and stuff. And you're like, what the hell? And you're like, oh yeah, people can take the tram up.
So this was our first experience with doing a hike that you can either drive up or take like
just take the tram
gondola, whatever.
Yeah, you can get to that summit basically and not be a hiker, which is kind of a weird thing. Like it's nice that other people can get up to these summits, but when you look like drowned rats and you've just hiked up and you're seeing like people that are like decked out in like this Patagonia North Face stuff that just took the tram up, it's a weird dynamic. I'll just say that. And it was clouded. We didn't have really good views The clouds moved in. But still a fun hike nonetheless. We have some good pictures up there. It was all literally just completely soaked, and we had changes of clothes at least, I think, at that point.
I remember it being really cold.
Yeah, and it was cold
like,
too.
I remember having to change my shirt and stuff because I was like shivering.
Yeah. But yeah, that was kind of another one. And then we literally got back down to Lonesome Lake, and it was still sunny and stuff. It was literally just like this rain cloud like lingering on Cannon or something that was hitting it. So that was kind of our first really hike where we got trapped in the rain at that point.
Yes.
And then later that week, you and I went out and we did the Osceolas, which was kind of just like we had never been to the Waterville Valley area. Again, I probably just logically was sort of looking at the mileage and distance and elevation gain. Another fun one, the Osceolas. Osceola has a good view. Between the Osceolas is the chimney, which everybody talks about. I don't think it's as crazy as some people make. Like if you read online, sometimes people make it sound like it's crazy. Like also you can just go around it. Yeah, there's a bypass. You don't have to go down it. I think we went down it maybe the first time, or I think we went up it the first time, and I actually haven't been back since.
No, I haven't either, obviously.
But we went up it on the way back. It's not bad going up. Going down is definitely a little sketchy.
Yeah,
it doesn't have good
take
grip.
Your time. Yeah,
but you can totally go around it. So like if you read stuff about it, like just know that, because I think some people
you don't have to do it.
People exaggerate about the chimney. Like there's much crazier trails and places in the Whites than the chimney. I promise you that. Even on standard trails. But yeah, that was, I don't really remember a ton about that day. I remember it's rocky at the bottom of the Osceolas.
Yeah, I remember having really nice views.
Yeah.
I remember just hanging out at the top for a bit. It was just like a nice, pleasant hike. I feel like like doing at least just regular Osceola, that could also be a good potential first
if you
hike
do that by itself.
For somebody. Like that was a very just nice, pleasant, easier hike.
If you want to do the 48, it's probably worth bagging east while you're up there.
Oh, I do remember when we were on East Osceola?
Yeah, East. Yeah. East has no views, by the way.
actually witnessed somebody finishing their 48.
Yeah, it's a weird orphan peak to have left.
Yeah, but that was kind of cool. That was our first time really like seeing somebody finish the 48. And I think at that point, because we were starting to...
Inspiring.
Inspiring.
We're like, wow, I can't believe they did that.
We were like, one day that'll be us.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just... So that was 11 and 12 for us. Yeah, nothing super... I mean, Osceola has great views. East is basically like a cairn in the woods when you get to it. There's some views between, so it's not like there's no views on it. I remember jets flying over and stuff when we finished too, which was kind of neat. At least when we got back to Osceola, but nothing really crazy on that hike, I would say. We did it from the Waterville Valley side too. In the winter, if you do it, you have to generally go from the Kank, which I'm going to do one day, I think, but haven't made it there yet. Then number 13, boy, oh boy, was a big one.
Lucky 13.
I'll always vividly remember this one. So we're going back to, I think it was after Columbus Day, I remember, because
the weekend after Columbus Day.
Because for work, I couldn't do something, and I remember we met Kelly and Pat, friends of the podcast, Kelly and Pat. But we stayed in a house with them around like sort of Conway, North Conway area again. And I had read a lot about the Northern Presidentials. I had started watching, I think, videos on them and just reading about them. I'm like, man, I really want to go up to the Northern Presidentials, and I really want to do a hike. Or just another presidential hike, because we had only done Eisenhower.
For a second, before you get into it. So as you guys can probably see, Nick is very much the planner of these hikes.
The researcher.
He's the one who does all the research, checks the weather, makes sure we have everything we need. I'm just along for the ride.
It's partially why I've got the nickname Scoutmaster Nick.
Yeah, I'm just along for the ride. So
or Weatherman Nick.
I just had to mention that.
Yeah, you know where we're going to.
Yeah, but I've never, I don't know, you're always like, hey, do you want to do this one? And I'd be like, sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you had known what Mount Adams looked like, you probably wouldn't have done that.
No, I wouldn't say that.
But yeah, so I just said it, but we picked Mount Adams. So that was lucky number 13 for us. First time going to the Northern Presidentials at all. The weather was supposed to be fantastic. It wasn't fantastic, which anybody that's hiked in that area knows that that's exactly what happens up there a lot. We decided to go up Airline, the standard out and back route. Mount Adams, fun fact, requires more elevation gain in the mileage than any other 4,000 footer in the Whites. You need to gain at least 4,500 feet in under actually 4 miles one way to get to the top. And that's by like one of the least steep ascents. It's probably the same by Valley Way, but definitely easier to go by that way. Yeah, this hike was like, and neither of us, I want to say we were like both, I had rolled my ankle. You were like sick the week before.
I was getting over a cold. Yeah.
It wasn't, we weren't 100% either.
No, we were not.
Yeah. And we kind of got up there. I want to say like once we popped out above sort of tree line, starting to hit tree line around airline, you could kind of see fog moving in and out. You couldn't see the top of Mount Adams. I think we thought we could see the top of Mount Adams.
We kept thinking we could see it.
But everybody knows Adams has like 3 fault summits, probably 3 or 4, something like that, when you're going up by airline cutoff. So you keep thinking like you're seeing the back of Quincy Adams, and then you're popping out, you see another hump, and then like, oh, you're actually finally seeing the summit. And actually, by the time we got up to the junction with like Gulf Side, continuing to go up airline to Adams Summit, which at that point we're like, I still remember the sign. It's like, oh, it's like 0.8 miles. Like, that's not bad. Where you hit Gulf Side and like you don't realize like you still have to go up like another 1,000+ feet and like that amount of elevation in mileage. It's steep. It's
terrain.
The terrain is a boulder field.
It was so this was my first time experiencing this type of terrain.
Yeah,
and
well, it's both our first time experiencing that.
It's hard to describe, but like Nick said, it's essentially a field of just rocks.
Yeah, like rocks from the size of a soccer ball to rocks to the size of a small car.
Yes.
Depending where you're going. Now knowing, I think Adams is still absolutely the most challenging summit to get up in the Whites. I would argue for that. Not that it's like the hardest in the world or anything, but in the Whites, it's for a day hike. It's a kick butt day hike.
Yes, for sure. Especially when you're not 100%.
Yeah, and you don't know exactly where you're going. So we ended up kind of in sort of this fog pea soup. It was hailing. I remember, again, the classic of like, looking back on this, I will fully admit that I should have made the decision to turn back. It worked out fine. We made it to the summit and back. But we were going cairn to cairn for a good chunk of it. And we were in terrain that we didn't know. I knew what the trail was and I knew roughly where we were. But if we had been in a fog out, like we probably could have ended up in... Not like we had layers and stuff. Like we would have been all right, but it wasn't.
We were prepared. We were very prepared with like what
it was
we brought.
Like 40-ish degrees. It was cold enough that it was hailing out in between. It wasn't snowing, but just like that pea soup fog. That's just not fun to be in. We crossed some Canadian hikers who didn't know what trail they were on. I do remember that they were on airline going up to Adams, and they thought they were on Gulf Side already. I'm like, no, you're not. I know enough to know you're not on Gulf Side yet. So they went back in the opposite direction. I think they were actually headed back up Adams for a second. I don't know what was going on. We didn't hear about anything on the news, so I guess they made their way back down. Not trying to diss any Canadians either, by the way. I just remember they were speaking French, and they said they were from Canada. But yeah, we made it up to Mount Adams. We have pictures of us on the summit. Maybe I'll find one and post it on our page. But we look delusional.
We look beat.
Borderline delusional. We got to the summit. I remember being happy we got there, but I just remember being like, fuck.
We didn't spend a lot of time at the summit.
No,
we basically just like touched the summit. Yeah. We made it and pretty much.
But literally, we just looked at each other and were like, what the fuck? Like it was unbelievably difficult, especially at the time. Now I look at hikes we've done since, and I'm like, it's just the time span, and I think what you're used to doing. That hike was way more challenging than anything else we had done. Literally the next day, I remember being super sore. Really, my legs were like destroyed.
I couldn't like talk the next day.
No.
Because I was sick and definitely didn't help.
I remember because Kelly and Pat got back and had done Cathedral Ledge, and like we were talking, I think both me and you just like we fell asleep at like 8 o'clock or something that day. Like we got back, ate food. And,
I remember though that house had a hot tub which came in clutch.
That's right. That was
and
amazing.
I remember like getting there and just getting back and being like, I'm going in the hot tub and just like melting in the hot tub because.
And I did want to highlight too that my original plan in naivety, we're going to try to do Adams and Madison that day. And we got to Madison Hut after doing Adams, and we were both like already like 2 ibuprofen deep, I think at that point. And we had some sandwiches, and I was like, yeah, we're not going to go up Madison today. And it was funny, the Northern Prezzies being the Prezzies, or just the presidentials, I should say. Yeah, it was completely clouded on Adams, but Madison was completely in the clear. Like the smarter decision for that day, if I would go back now, is to do Madison, and we should have just bailed on Adams and just done Madison and had views because it was beautiful on Madison, but Adams was just sticking with clouds. The rain stopped as the day went on. I remember we had great views coming down Adams. Yeah, and I remember, but the thought wouldn't have even remotely crossed my mind to go back up Adams by the time we got to Gulf Side that day because we were just so tired. Like there's just no way. Wouldn't have been able to do it. And we went down Valleyway, and as always when you're coming down, your spirits lift. That was definitely like I felt like we were pretty. That was an accomplishment for us. Yes. For two people that didn't really grow up hiking at all or really have parents that hiked that much or anything. Like I was like, wow, we were up there and we did it.
Yeah, and it's funny, even though that was definitely the most challenging hike we had done so far, and like definitely had its
ups and downs.
Ups and downs.
Literal ups and downs.
Yeah. Looking back, I have to say that is my favorite hike. Adams is my favorite.
Yeah, I think it's probably between Madison and Adams. Right now, they're definitely my favorite 4,000 footers in the whites. I ended up adopting airline cutoff, which is funny to think now that this many years later, I'd be a trail maintainer up in the Northern Presidentials doing that. But yeah, it's pretty wild. But Adams, I think, is just spectacular. On a clear day, that view is really tough to beat.
Yeah, Adams is a special one, and I mean, fortunately, I did get to go back with you years later, and it was a beautiful day. It was like a 10 out of 10, perfect day.
Yeah, I've had views almost every other time I've been up there since then. But I also have picked very good weather days every time I've been up there. I think I'm on 6 or 7 summits.
Lucky number 13. That was definitely my favorite.
That was 13. So after our stories of this now, we're going to move once back again into Memorial Day of 2017. And we had Nate and my dad again that year. Stayed around Conway again. And I think my dad at this point was curious to get up in the presidentials too. I believe that's where sort of my idea came from, looking at the presidentials, because I was just like, these are really different hikes. It's different than Franconia Ridge. But I also was like, my dad had done Franconia Ridge. Nate had done Moose Lock. I had done Franconia Ridge with Nate by this point, I think, too. We did it with a friend, so I'd already done the ridge twice. So Nate was pretty confident. And we decided to do the Jackson Pierce loop, which is a pretty common first kind of hike for a lot of people up there.
Specifically Pierce.
Yeah, I should say Pierce. Pierce by itself, by Crawford Path, very easy hike. Always highly recommend that for new people that are people new to hiking the 4,000 footers or just New Hampshire. It's a good hike. Jackson Pierce is it's a challenging loop. I wouldn't say it's crazy. Going up Jackson's very steep.
Yes.
This was another sort of Memorial Day, not a great day when we started, but ended up being super nice. Wasn't particularly cold. I don't remember it being particularly hot.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was cold or hot. It was kind of just mild temperatures.
But nothing notable. I think on Jackson, we were going up and someone said there was no views, which was kind of just a dick thing to say. He's like, yeah, it's just fog up there. And we were only halfway up. And
we ended up having
views. It's just buzz off, dude. If you're coming down a mountain, I don't think we're ever that nowadays, where you're you don't discourage. He was almost trying to discourage us. It was weird. I don't know what that guy's issue was that day. I think he was just pissed because he got up early and didn't see anything.
I don't know, 20, 30 awesome people you see hiking.
You do see the occasional.
There's one not so nice person.
Yeah, you see the occasional dicks up there. It happens. But yeah, so that was 14 and 15 for us.
One thing I do remember about that one is, so I remember Nate and I drove up together the day before because Nick had to go a little early.
I had to work a half day, so I actually drove super early with my dad.
Yeah, so on the way up, Nate and I had grabbed sandwiches from Jay's Deli, which Jay's Deli is a small Rhode Island mass chain, and they make there's less of them now, but they make really, really good sandwiches, amazing sandwiches, heavy bread, and I remember I used to always get this fried chicken sandwich that had mayo, bacon, cheese, all that stuff, it was absolutely delicious sandwich. Yes. But the sandwiches are huge. So when Nate and I were coming up, I didn't finish my sandwich. I had probably half of it. So I thought it was a brilliant idea to bring this hefty sandwich with me on our hike. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we got to the top of, I think it was Jackson, and I was famished. So I housed this sandwich, and it tasted delicious initially. But then hiking down, big mistake.
When coming down Pierce.
Big mistake.
Yeah.
My advice for hiking is don't bring a heavy meal with you to have at the top, especially if you're doing a more strenuous hike. Keep it light, peanut butter and jelly, trail mix, jerky. Don't bring a fried chicken hefty. It was like a buffalo.
It was like a buffalo chicken sandwich
with mayo on it. I mean, it was absolutely delicious, but not good for a hike.
Yeah. So you had a rough time coming down. We made it. Yeah, we made it. Pierce has a great view of the presidentials, by the way. I was mentioning it's a good first. I think it's one of the good first ones for that reason too. Is you have a full front, a front seat to Eisenhower and Monroe and Washington and stuff. So it's really beautiful up there, and we had a beautiful day up there. So that was 14, 15. Then again, we were really starting into it. We broke a new we popped our day trip cherry with this one, but we actually drove up and did a day trip, just driving up.
This was our first day trip?
Yeah.
We drove up that day?
Yeah, this was our first day trip. So this was in, I think, June of 2017. Again, it was me, you, and Hannah, and we drove up to do Garfield. for our number 16. And yeah, that was, so on us for 2, it's like people have different connotations of day trips. Like if you live in New Hampshire and you got to drive an hour, like I see people too that'd be like, oh, I drove an hour and back. It's like, oh, like, yeah, that's so tough. Like generally it takes us between 3 and 4 hours to get to anywhere in the Whites, if not more, when you're including stops because of where we lived at the time and where we live now. Since then, day trips are something I've done a bunch, but this was our first. So it's kind of a bigger jump when you think about it mentally, especially from where we come from. Rhode Islanders, and I grew up in Rhode Island, have a notorious rap for not wanting to drive far places.
Yes, that is true. And I think too, we realized like, okay, if we want to do the 48,
we can't wait.
We can't stay at like a hotel or a house every single time we do the 48.
Or
like,
go on a holiday weekends all the time. It's not like we were in a rush to do them, but we wanted to go hiking and we're like, I don't want to wait till like the summer when we're up there or to the next long weekend. And it's expensive
to have to like always stay somewhere every single time we hike.
It's also expensive.
We had to make this happen.
And Garfield, I mean, where it is off Route 3 in relation to us, like I from our house now, like I've gotten up there in like less than 3 hours before if you're going like 80 something the entire way and you don't hit traffic and you don't stop much. But it's not bad to get to. You can go off Gale River Road, which is closed in the winter, which is fun. It adds more into the hike if you do it in the winter. But yeah, we did Garfield. That was another day. It was supposed to be beautiful. Once we hit around Waterville Valley on the way up 93, it started raining. It proceeded to rain until we were coming down probably about a mile from the summit of Garfield. It stopped and the clouds lifted and it was beautiful, but it rained the entire time we were hiking up Garfield.
The clouds lifted and it was beautiful when we were almost done with the hike.
Yeah. I think we had like basically a mile. I remember it stopped raining after we got off the summit, but it was clouded. Like we hung out. We have pictures of us in total clouds up there. There wasn't a lot of people on the trail, but yeah, it was beautiful. Like I remember we drove through Franconia Notch on the way back, and I was like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, I know. If we had started an hour or two later, we would have had views.
Yeah, we would have.
But we were completely socked in.
Yeah. But we had fun. I mean, me, you, and Hannah had a fun time. I think you both were asleep by the time we got to Franconia Notch.
Probably
as well, because we had gotten up pretty early to drive there. But yeah, popped our cherry for the day trips. That was our first one around June of 2017. Then again, like we were saying, we didn't want to wait to be up there again. But once again, summer 2017, we stayed around Newfound Lake. We also got engaged, which was...
We got engaged in 2016.
Oh, we missed that. All right.
It's okay.
I should know when we did that because we got married in 2018. All right.
Whatever hikes we did summer 2016, we had recently gotten engaged.
All right. But anyways, that's not important. Yeah. That's not important. I know
Being
when we
engaged
got,
isn't important.
I know when we got married. I did the thing. Anyways... we were up again summer 2017, staying around Newfound Lake with my family, and we wanted to do kind of a interesting peak bagging day in another area we hadn't checked out. So we checked out Tom Field and Willie. That day again, Tom Field, Willie, pretty challenging hike to do all three in one day. We went up and did Tom first, across the field, across to Willie, back out, and then we hit Avalon on the way down too.
Yeah, that was a long day.
And kind of hot, humid, not ridiculous. One thing I remember about that day was that a trail runner came out of nowhere and scared the crap out of me. Like I literally was like,
about that.
Like I made a noise. I like squeaked on the trail. I was like, kind of like because a trail runner just blasted by me going up the A to Z trail when we almost got to Tom. Yeah, I mean, another day with pretty good views. I mean, we've done Tom Field, Willie in the winter. If there's enough snowpack, like I think some people think this is like bullshit, but when there's good snowpack on Tom, it has fantastic views.
Yeah, honestly,
it's wooded in the summer mostly.
If you can do it, I recommend doing Tom Field and Willie in the winter over the summer.
It's way different. Like Tom feels totally
experience.
different. If
you get better views.
If you get a couple feet of snow on Tom, there's really good views across to the presidentials. It doesn't even feel like the same peak. Otherwise, in the summer, it's like it's pretty much wooded up there. There's a couple.
Which is fine,
if you're poking around the summit, there's definitely some views out to like the Bonds and the Twins and stuff you can see across. Field has kind of one view.
Yeah, sort of.
There's some pretty views across going from Field to Willie. Willie has the best view of the bunch, I think, in the summer. You get to the sort of the cliffs overlooking, kind of you're looking over to like Webster Cliff and stuff across. You can see like Carrigan and whatnot and some of the other peaks. And there's kind of a nice lunch spot over there where you're kind of just hanging above the cliffs over there. Also our first experience with Gray Jays.
Yes.
Which don't feed the Gray Jays. You shouldn't feed the Gray Jays. I'll stress that.
We didn't know. We were naive to...
Yeah,
all that.
I mean, if you feed the Gray Jays, it's not the end of the world because a lot of people are doing it. But I'm gonna highlight as as knowing now you shouldn't feed the gray jays. It's super cool. And guess what? They'll land in your hand if you put it out anyways most of the time because they think they're going to get fed.
We just thought it was cool to have them land in our hand.
Oh, yeah.
And,
We got the picture.
Eat off our hands.
Yeah.
We got the pictures.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, if you're doing the 48 and you're hiking in the areas where the gray jays are, because they're not everywhere in the whites, they're definitely in specific areas, but it is cool to get that picture.
Yeah.
That cool picture of you with the gray jay.
I'm going to let Munchie in really quick.
Okay.
She's being annoying.
She hears us talking about gray jays.
All right, the cat is in here. Moose just wanted to commentate and just let us know that she's here. You probably can hear her on the mic. So Tom Field Willie was 17, 18, 19, and we're getting closer to the magical halfway point over here. Not that it would be the halfway point because there's just other lists and it just keep continuing. But at this point, we're like, cool. We're 19 in, kind of making some progress. Been to quite a few different areas of the Whites, experienced a lot of different things. Nothing compared to Mount Adams at this point. We're like, it's not even close to as difficult as Mount Adams. Like, that's one thing that kind of held true. Later that week, my dad wanted to get out again, and I think it was like the 10th peak for my dad. My dad wanted to hit double digits at that point.
Yeah, probably
something
about.
Like that. But we did Tecumseh and Waterville Valley, so across from Osceola. I don't know what Munchie's doing right now, other than rubbing up on me. But yeah, we did Tecumseh. That was another day. Had really no views. Kind of had some views, I think, from the ski slopes around there. Just me, my dad, and you. And it was just kind of a fun day. Nothing too crazy about that one. Tecumseh is short and steep.
And it was also like we were socked in on that one too. Yeah, from what I remember.
Just fog.
Very humid and
a lot of slugs.
Yeah.
A lot of orange slugs.
That's also not a bad like first one too. Yeah. It's pretty easy.
Yeah,
pretty
short
and steep.
Yeah, and I think one cool thing about Tecumseh, at least if you do it from the bottom of Waterville Valley, is that I like how Munchie's hopping up with you and she never like hops up to you to pet her. She must feel like she needs attention. Anyways, but one notable thing about Tecumseh is that it has this really nice piece of trail work that I believe the Civilian Conservation Corps did back like probably in like the 30s or whatever, or yeah, probably around the 30s, Great Depression, or I might be pulling that out of my butt. But either way, it was definitely made by them. But there's just this really nice stone staircase that goes up to the top of it, probably for like a mile.
You're much better at remembering those little details than I am.
Thanks. That's what I'm here for. But yeah, it's got a nice staircase. It's short and steep. I think it's like maybe 5 miles out and back from that direction. You can do it a couple different ways, but that's the way most people do it. Then we're fast forwarding to Columbus Day weekend again of 2017, the next holiday weekend that we got up there, and we did the Hancocks. What do you remember about the Hancocks?
The Hancocks. So this isn't really related to necessarily like the terrain of the hike, but I want to say this is the first hike we ever did summit beers on. We did, yeah. And it also was like early when we got to like, I think when we got to Hancock, we did them at South Hancock. Yes. So this is something we've kind of done. I mean, we don't do it every single hike. It definitely depends on the type of hike, the weather, all of that. But after you want to bring a beer. Yeah, after you've done a good hike, there's nothing better than just opening a beer at the top and just like enjoying it with whoever you're with. So this was the first time we had a summit beer together. I do remember that about the Hancocks. I remember there were also Gray Jays at this one. Yep. I'm trying to think if there's any... No views from Hancock, which I think a lot of people have heard of them as North and South Hancock, but I think the northern one's just called Hancock and the southern one's South Hancock. Oh, I thought it was North and South. Going up to Hancock's really steep, like very steep, like it's really flat and stuff. And we also did these in the winter. Yeah, right? We've done them in the winter before. See, I feel like I remember doing it more in the winter than I do the first time. Yeah, I don't remember going. I think we were just tired and going up and kind of going through the motions. But yeah, it had no views from the northern one. Had pretty good views from south, but it's not like these peaks don't have like spectacular views compared to a lot of the whites. I feel like I still think they're fun. They're fun, but I feel like people don't really do some of these hikes, and the Hancocks are one of them, unless you're trying to do the 48. Yeah, and I mean, there's one other way that probably is mentioned a decent amount is going up the Arrow Slide, because there was an old trail that used to go up there, and that's kind of on my bucket list to do. But if you do the Arrow Slide up the Hancocks, I'm pretty sure it's a very legit and open and a difficult slide to get up. I probably wouldn't do it unless I was with someone that I know, but that's supposed to have really good views and stuff. But the normal route across the summits is kind of like just really, really flat, and then it gets really steep as you're sort of approaching those two mountains, and then it kind of is just like it's like a 10 or 11 mile round trip again. And we did it from basically the Kank where the hairpin turn is, which is probably one of the most dangerous parts of the hike, is just like trying to cross the Kangamangas, trying to cross the hairpin turn around there in Columbus Day weekend traffic.
I also remember on the way back when we were driving by, we saw someone that was parked on the side of the road that managed to flip their SUV because they were parked in an embankment, and the SUV just like totally tipped over and it was on its side.
Yeah, that sucks.
The can gets crazy on Columbus Day weekend. It's freaking insane.
We had the foliage was really nice too.
Oh yeah, it was pretty. And I remember Gray Jays trying to steal stuff. And
yeah, I remember like them watching me while I was trying to eat my lunch.
You're like, man, I'm just trying to eat my stuff. So that was 21 and 22, and nothing super special about those. And then another sort of milestone as we ran into winter of 2018. Ended up doing our first winter hike, and a lot of people recommend this as a first winter hike. I think I'd read about it multiple places, but we did Wambeck.
I thought Wambeck was our 24th hike.
No. We're going to get there in a second.
Oh, sorry.
Patience.
I don't know why I thought it was.
Patience. Yeah, Wambeck was number 23.
Number 23. Okay.
Number 23. But yeah, our first winter hike. This was like a finicky weather weekend. I think it was probably Martin Luther King weekend, I want to say, or President's Day weekend, one of the two. I think
it was Martin Luther King.
I think you're right. Actually, I'm looking at the date, and yeah, it definitely was Martin Luther King weekend. But yeah, and we went up for that weekend, and like usually when we go up, we'll ski like 1 or 2 days and then hike one day. And when we drove up, it was like one of those weird, like it got warm and rainy, which I guess isn't super uncommon nowadays, but it got warm and rainy really unexpectedly. And the day we were planning to hike, it was like foggy, and it wasn't raining, but the temperature like plummeted overnight. Like I remember my car, we were staying near Loon, and we wanted to ski Loon rather than hike the next day. And my car was literally a block of ice, and like I couldn't get into it. It was like I had to like dig it out with my keys and stuff.
Why don't I remember that?
I don't know. Probably because you didn't have to get the car ready for us to go skiing.
Probably.
But yeah, it was like we didn't want to hike because I'm like, yeah, the temperatures just don't look good. The next day looked way better. Like it just looked like a bluebird day, which it did end up being a bluebird day. It was like we went up like probably the Friday, and then it ended up being the Sunday. Like we hiked. So new experience was super cold weather. This was our first winter hike. I don't know if I said that yet, but
yes,
this is our first
winter hike.
Our first winter 4,000 footer.
We were ready for it at this point.
And so with the AMC recognized a couple different lists besides even like the White Mountain 4,000 footers and the 48. And one of them is doing all these peaks in calendar winter, which Ash has done a decent amount. I'm almost halfway through now that I've done in the winter. But different animal. A lot of the mountains change a lot, and sort of the gear you're using, like it's almost a different type of hiking entirely, depending what you're doing. But we chose Wambeck. I want to say I notably remember about that hike was that we got to the trailhead and it was -13.
It was very cold.
It was very cold.
It was very
very
cold.
nippy.
But one thing that
not unusual for New Hampshire that time of year, but
no, it wasn't
cold.
like it was like a freak.
The coldest we had ever been in.
Yeah, it was cold. And one thing I remember about hiking in the winter and hiking in like the frigid cold is you definitely underestimate how efficient your body is at trying to keep you warm, especially if you're moving and you're going up a steep terrain, you're working really hard. Because I remember when we got to the trailhead, I like layered up. Like I put on every single layer I had. I had on
because you're freezing. So
my ski goggles, but that's not necessarily a good idea, know.
Even when it's like, even by the time we started moving, like I vividly remember it might have been -13 when we got in our car to go there, but it was still like negative single digits. I just remember when within
maybe like 30 minutes of hiking, I was like sweating.
Yeah,
like, and I had I had way too many layers on. So, but again, it was our first winter hike, so we didn't really understand the whole like layering, delayering.
Sort of heat management and stuff.
There.
Your body produces a ton of heat. Like, speaking for myself personally, when I hike in the winter, even if it's like -5 out, like once I start moving for 30 or 40 minutes, I can be wearing like a fleece vest and like a Smart Wool layer, like a base layer. Yeah, you don't
need as many.
And like insulated pants.
You don't need
and I'm
all
like,
these
fine.
layers. You just need a couple good quality like layers
for sure,
and you're good.
And there's hand warmers. We can go like maybe as we approach winter again this year. Like we can have you back on and we can talk about sort of winter strategizing for what.
Yeah,
what
I feel like you could
wear.
do a whole podcast on winter
hiking. Easily, and kind of how to manage those things. But anyways, we were learning, but we're like at this point we're like we've been through a lot, and I'm like I'd really like to see one of these peaks in the winter. We didn't have snowshoes. I don't think we had micro spikes either at that point.
I'm pretty sure we did.
Or maybe we had spikes by that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we must have had micro spikes.
We just had like the
Catulas.
The basic ones.
Yeah, just Catula and micro spikes. So we had to wear, for people that don't know what micro spikes are, they're exactly like they sound. They're little spikes that basically with a rubber sort of gasket that sort of attached to your boots that give you traction on packed snow and ice. They're like the lowest level of crampons, but they're definitely more serious than like Yak Tracks or something. You're not going to wear micro spikes to walk down your driveway in the winter if it's icy. Like they're pretty legit, like 1/4 inch spikes or 1/8 of an inch spikes. So yeah, we did Wambeck. It was super cold. I think probably a pretty other notable thing that I remember was we got to Star King, did all this, and like we're moving the whole time. Like we were good once we kind of got settled in on like how to be warm. And one thing I remember reading in the forecast that day and using Mountain Forecast and weather.gov was like the wind chill was still in like the -15, -20 range. We were on Wambeck, so it was pretty sheltered for most of the hike. You're not really getting blasted by the wind. But there are a few spots where it's a little bit open. And I want to say around one of the lookouts, you like took off your gloves to get some food or whatever.
Yeah, I took off my gloves for maybe 30 seconds. Yeah. Less than a minute.
You were probably already getting cold too from stopping.
Yeah, which was a mistake. And I remember I had never felt anything like this in my life where I put my gloves back on and my hands hurt so bad.
Yeah, like, fun. If you've never had it happen,
throbbing.
Your hands when they're sort of in between, like getting really cold and like you still have feeling, like it physically feels like almost like a burning sensation you literally get with your hands. And you also get pain when like blood starts to flow back into them if you get frost nip or worse, frostbite or things like that. But yeah, I remember I scrambled in my backpack to get hand warmers to give you and stuff. And also what happens when you lose dexterity, it gets harder to put your gloves on, which is why a lot of people wear just straight up mittens in the winter, or they wear undergloves with mittens. But I remember you took them off, you like panicked.
I don't think I had undergloves at this point. I think I just had mittens.
We definitely, I don't even know if I don't think I had mittens at that point even.
I've always been a mitten person, but I just had mittens.
Definitely use mittens now with undergloves.
Yeah.
With hand warmers inside them.
Yep.
But I remember we stopped and now when I look back too is like if we had just started moving again and like made you move, like we would have been okay.
Yeah, I was like panicking.
As soon as your body starts moving again, like in the winter, even when you're cold, like as long as you're moving, your body's producing heat and like you're generally gonna stay pretty warm.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I within like 10 minutes I was fine.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember
it was a panicky. I was like, I don't want, like my thought was like, oh my God, I don't want Ash to like lose a finger or something. And like I was pretty cold too.
Yeah.
We were probably being overdramatic, but
we didn't know though. Like,
now when I lose
that.
feeling in my hands hiking, it's kind of like oh, like I need to like okay, like I need to be conscious of this and like warm my hands up. But I think back then we were just like, oh God, like like feeling will come back. Like it's not good to lose feeling in your extremities, but I probably speak for a lot of people who've hiked in the winter or just in the whites or in general, where it's like it's not totally unusual to lose a little bit of feeling in maybe your fingertips or areas you've gotten frostbite or frost nip, probably really. But it happens. Like feeling comes back. The best thing you can usually do is layer up and just move.
Yeah, which is what we
trap
did.
Your body heat. Use your body.
That's what we did. It was fine.
Yeah, so we made it. We had great views of the presidentials. I have a view that actually got into a work calendar. That I had sent in. They do like an annual calendar that the employees can send in pictures, and I have a beautiful picture just past the summit of Wambeck. There's an awesome blowdown with a view of the presidentials. That's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Then the Bluebird Day.
That was a fun hike.
Views are awesome in the winter because there's less humidity usually in the air. There's no haze, so we could see super clearly. I remember the road leading up to where you are in Jefferson too had really pretty views. Of the
that whole area near Wambeck is really pretty.
Yeah. Jefferson's a pretty town over there, and that whole sort of like where the general store areas and stuff is pretty. And last, and kind of, I guess we'll go into the descent after this. This isn't going to be a long one. We're only halfway through.
Like hiking.
Yeah. This is definitely going to be a more hiking geared one, which we'll try to do every now and then. But I miss Josh, obviously, and other topics. So this was President's Day weekend of 2018, and we wanted to do Mount Hale. I don't know how we got to Mount Hale. Hale is not known to be one of the more spectacular 4,000 footers. It's probably one of the most least spectacular ones.
It's a good winter one though, for people who are new to hiking in the winter.
I would say in the winter, I think that was my thought process. I think because I'm like, I want to do winter ones, but ones that aren't exposed to the wind and the elements. Like we weren't going to go hop up in the northern presidentials again in the winter for sure. Like that wasn't going to happen. We knew at least that much and had that much common sense. But yeah, we decided on Hale. That was a whole adventure for a whole different host of reasons.
I feel like it was more memorable leading up to the hike than the actual hike.
So like, I'll try to cut it brief because it's not really hiking related, but where we stayed at Newfound Lake, the owner kind of like, I don't even want to say swindled us, but he exaggerated how easy it was going to be to get up the driveway. I didn't have an all-wheel drive car at that point. I just had a Corolla, and we actually got stuck in a ditch like around like I think like Hebron, around Newfound Lake, trying to go up like a hill to get to we just wanted to get to the house. It was like in the middle of the night. It was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. We just wanted to go to bed and like get ready the next day to go hiking. And yeah, I ended up in a ditch, tried to dig myself out. Through some same stretch of events, we just got fed up. We walked like probably a quarter mile up the road to the house with our stuff at like 10 o'clock at night.
Almost ate it like 16 times.
It was just a sheet of ice. I think I literally put micro spikes on to walk up and back down the driveway. That's how icy it was. This guy got like a half-star review from me because he was a dick to deal with. Like he just, I don't know. It was just a really bad experience.
You needed like chains.
You
on
needed
your
chains
tires.
to get up. This driveway was super steep. It was a sheet of ice. It just was. There was no excuse on his end for like telling us that we'd be able to get up it. Luckily, we got a tow truck there. I called AAA. AAA didn't even want to send a tow truck to get us where we were. So AAA getting you everywhere. Just know that if you end up hiking in the Whites and stay in these places, like AAA does not get you out everywhere. It's not like living down around where we live in the suburbs and the cities in southeastern Mass and stuff. Like they're not going to risk in certain situations getting their tow truck stuck to get you out, which you probably could have gotten a tow truck stuck almost where we were. But we got some guy down the street that was like some towing company that was down the street like a mile. Conveniently.
Yeah. This guy though had like a beast tow truck.
It was massive. It was bigger than any AAA tow truck I had seen, and it was like, I think this place was just like they did towing and
this
did
wasn't
like
until the next day
snowmobiles.
either.
Yeah, and this was the next day. So at this point we thought like our hopes were shot. But I think you got service earlier in the day, or we noticed something. I don't forget how we even found the towing company.
I don't know.
Maybe on the internet, and then we tried to call it. There was no cell service at the house.
We basically just decided to go into the house and just like settle in for the night and figure it out in the morning. And I forget.
But somehow throughout a lot, we ended up getting to Mount Hale the next day. I remember I was supposed to meet up with someone I knew at work to go hike it, and like I was like, I don't even know if we're gonna get there. But we did get to Mount Hale eventually. And Hale in the winter changed a little bit because Zealand Road closes, so it adds to, instead of being like 4 miles, it's like a 10-mile hike, which you're just a lot of road walk. I agree with Ash though, in the winter it's probably not as awful as people make it out to be. You have views through the trees a little bit, kind of going up to Mount Hale. It's a viewless peak. I think just spikes the whole way.
Short and steep.
Yeah, just really short and steep, at least in the winter, at least once you hit the actual trailhead off Zealand Road. The road's flat and it's kind of pretty actually walking along it.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I remember though, this was my first hike that I did entirely in snowshoes.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did that all in snowshoes.
Which
I just said spikes, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, because I remember we hadn't even started the actual hike yet.
Yeah.
And I definitely pulled like a hamstring or something.
Yeah.
And once we started like moving and hiking, I think I just kind of like forgot about it.
Yeah.
But as soon as we got back and we were kind of hiking back
to
our car on the flat ground, it was terrible. I could like barely walk.
Yeah, you were and I remember like there was through some strange reason I had repacked like my sort of little medical bag in my backpack, and like I didn't have any ibuprofen.
Of course, which I mean, it's not your fault. I should have also had.
You probably could have had some, but yeah. So you toughed that one out. That was rough. I remember you coming out, but you made it. And ironically, it didn't hurt you the entire time we were actually hiking and climbing down Mount Hale.
I think it's because we were going more like up, and then for some
you.
Reason, I don't know if it was like just the way I was moving versus like on the flat ground. I don't know, but I remember people were coming by us in snowmobiles, and I was joking like I was gonna like wave down a snowmobile to bring me back to the car.
Yeah, I do remember that. And since then too, like we've invested in like MSR snowshoes that are significantly lighter.
These were hefty snowshoes.
There were Tubbs ones which people use, but like we didn't have the hiking Tubbs ones. Like I had like massive like 28-inch or something snowshoes or 30-inch snowshoes.
We didn't know. I mean, they did the job, but they were hefty snowshoes.
Yeah. So that was Mount Hale, our second winter peak, and at that point we were halfway through for number 24. So we'll have to part 2 this, but I think we're gonna get into the descent now. Anything you want to plug? I know you said you probably had some podcasts or something you sort of want to mention. Ash is a podcast enthusiast.
Yeah, so I listen to a very like wide array of podcasts. I don't really have like a specific genre of podcast that I like. I'm definitely really into like the true crime podcast, which I know like a lot of people are. They're definitely become more and more popular. I listen to like the popular ones like Crime Junkie. I know a lot of people know about that. I think
Crime Junkie's like the biggest one like of podcasts, like
probably. Yeah. So I've listened to that for a while. I will plug a true crime podcast that's not as popular. It's called Morbid. I've been listening to that for maybe like 2 years now. It's cool. I like the way that they tell the stories. It's very like conversational, and they kind of go back and forth and banter a little bit. And it's really cool too because they're from Mass, so they're from this area.
I've listened to a couple.
They live probably like 30 minutes from us. You know, they're not far from here.
Bridgewater or something.
That
like
area,
that.
yeah. So that's a really cool one, and they pick a lot of like unique stories. So that's a good one. Morbid. Check it out if you do really like true crime. I also listen to more like, I don't even know what genre it would be, but one that I really like too is We Can Do Hard Things, which Glennon Doyle does. She's an author. She does it with her wife and her sister. That one's really cool. They talk about a variety of different topics. So, you know, if you're into that, I would say it's a little bit more geared towards women, just with the topics and things that they cover, but that's a really good one too. Sometimes they'll have some cool guests on. So I'll plug those two.
Yeah. Check them out. People.
Two totally different podcasts, but, again, if you like true crime, definitely check out Morbid. We Can Do Hard Things is also a really good one too.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to plug this week, other than I've got like 4 new YouTube videos up. I finally finished editing a bunch of video footage I took from Vermont. Really happy with how Camel Sump came out, that video in particular. But as I usually mention, Nick hikes and plays guitar. If anybody's interested and wants to see what Vermont has to offer in some of their 4,000 footers. But yeah, I think this is a long one. I think we're gonna break a record. We'll be back with part 2 of this for sure. Definitely more hiking centric for sure. Josh will have housing updates and a whole bunch of other stuff when he gets back.
There's a lot going on with the Rogers family.
Yeah, with the Rogers family right now. He's got some other news and stuff that I'll let him share if he chooses to do so. But yeah, they're going to be in their house settling. Hope everything works out well for you, Mel and Josh and Jeremiah.
Yeah, we
Hope
can't
you
wait
guys
to see the
settle in.
place.
Can't wait to see the new place and stuff. Love you guys. Yeah, and I guess we'll just kind of end it here. All right. So what's going to be your ending tagline? Usually Josh does this.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah. I hadn't really given it much thought.
All right. We'll just swing it.
Until next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. PUDs Podcast was produced and recorded in Black Hat Studios by the Pud Boys. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving us a review and subscribing. Find us on social media, and we'll see you next time.